Hi, and welcome to Education Roundtable. This is Larry Petraccaro, and my guest today is Stacey Robinson. Stacey is the Director of Human Resources for the South Orange Maplewood School District, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I mean, what that encompasses, how it might be the same or different as what we might expect to find in the private sector, since this is really a public institution. So, Stacey, welcome.
Thank you
for coming. And maybe we could start, if you could give us a little bit of background on yourself. Is HR something you gravitated toward, or something that, maybe when you first stepped out of the crib you said, I'm going to be an HR director? I don't know. That seems to work with some kids. I don't know if that's how it was with you.
So HR is something I stumbled onto. When I was a little kid, I said, I'm going to be a teacher. And that was what I always wanted to be. However, we don't always grow up to be that. I started my career in insurance, and when the insurance industry was a little, contracting in the 90s, I was laid off from insurance. And I said, well, I always wanted to be a teacher, so I'll go be a teacher. And so I began by substitute teaching, and I must admit I was the most awful substitute teacher you could have ever had. But I was an accountant. So I began my career in education as an accountant in Patterson Public Schools.
Did you? What does an accountant? What would you have done as an accountant?
Well, in the business office, the school district is a business, just has that business aspect of it, just like any other business. So as an accountant in the in the accounting department, I did grants. Mm-hmm. Student activity funds had to be audited and monitored, and various closing entries for your books every month. Your books have to close and they have to open. So, but my focus there was for the grants, Title I. Those grants are big, IDEA, and they have to be monitored and charged appropriately and billed to the provider, which is the federal and state government. So that's how I started. I stayed there for about 2 years, and then I went to my beloved Newark. Mm-hmm. I'm a native of Newark, and so it was like a homecoming to go there. And there I went as a senior accountant, which I served there for 2 years in the accounting department. And at that time, I was also studying for my master's degree in education. I have to say that when I got into education, I knew I would never leave, because education what allowed you to be that environment. Coming from a corporate environment where it was, the blue suit, the gray suit, the black suit, everything was pretty uniformed. Manner of, dressing and the etiquettes were very uniformed. When I went into education, it was reflective of a myriad of ideology, styles, looks, and I was like, this is great. So I went back to school, as I said, and got my master's. And once I completed it, I became a special assistant. Public schools is a large district. It's divided into 5 different sections, and each section has an assistant superintendent. And to each assistant superintendent, they're assigned to special assistant. One that does instruction, one that does operations. And I was the operations. Budget, staffing, facilities, community relations, that sort of thing. I did that for 9 years, and I tend to, once I've mastered a job, it tends to bore me after a while, even though I have to say that a special assistant was a very exciting and interesting job, but after a while, I wanted something different, and I went back into the business office as the director of support services. There was 3 departments, printing and professional mail service, transportation and warehouse, in-house transportation, because the district had its own transport, and the largest department was purchasing. So that was quite a challenge, and it was quite stimulating. And I worked in that department as the director for 6 years. One day I got offered a position as HR in Willingboro, New Jersey, public schools, and I was ready for a change. There were a lot of different things going on in Newark public schools, and I was like, well, maybe I'll do something different. And I came to know HR. It's still a business office function, so I felt like I'd be well-rounded. And as far as the marketability of it all, I know purchasing, accounting, budget, staffing, So, I could really function well and market myself well as a business office person for school districts.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like you kept looking for challenging and more diverse challenging, and it was interesting at the beginning you said that you originally wanted to be a teacher. You said a couple of things. One is I think you said you originally wanted to be a teacher, and you kind of stumbled into HR. So I'd be curious if you see analogies between the teaching profession and function and the HR profession and function that melded together for you. And the other thing was you talked about all the different types of things you had to do, and I guess I have to believe that that kind of variety, if it's properly utilized, it has to make you better in all the other areas that you do there. I don't think anything is ever so discrete that they're not connected. And finally, these are things we maybe can talk about. You mentioned when you were in Newark, you did community relations was one of your functions, and that I think is kind of interesting to me, because I think that schools in many respects are kind of the foundation and heart of a community. So just curious what you had to do in that. So let's start with if I can remember all these questions, let's start with the first thing. Do you see any similarities between what you thought you would have to do as a teacher and what you do now as an HR?
So it's interesting because I am a teacher in a lot of ways, and I incorporated that into my position as well. As an accountant, not necessarily. I didn't have the outreach to do that because we were too busy doing the work of accounting. But when I became a special assistant, then you had to do professional development with the staff. You had to help the assistant superintendent set up professional development. And because I was the operations special assistant, there was a lot of things that I would present and do workshops with the administrators as well as administrative support staff on, how do you put in your purchase orders, with the paperwork for staffing or different things. Because out in the schools, the units, the cohorts, they were in the school building in the community. So I had come from downtown central office, so I had to bridge how the schools looked at central office and how central office functioned so that we could have a better relationship. Because sometimes they sit in the school and go, I don't know why they asked for that. Well, then let me tell you why they asked for that. So that was teaching. We would have parent liaisons were a big component. I think they were a Title I component, and when they do workshops for parents in the community. So I do workshops if they wanted, me to do a workshop on anything. It could be how to use Microsoft Excel or how to sign on to the system and navigate through the district's website. There's always something to teach. So it just transcends. When I was in purchasing, of course, we had to learn. I used to teach as far as how do you do RFPs. I actually did presentations for the state, New Jersey School Boards Association, and with Rutgers Center for Local Governments under the tutelage of Mr. Shoup. So I always taught, but I just didn't teach in the way that I pictured it in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy it. I enjoy improving a person, developing a person. It gives me pleasure to go into a department and leave it with people knowing more than when I came in. So I always say that's my function, is to make sure that you're better when I leave than when I came.
Well, it's a nice way to approach it.
Right. So I teach.
You teach. Okay. So we got that.
Yeah, I got to teach. Right.
And then I guess the community affairs aspect of it is almost a direct extension of what you just talked about in terms of you're relating to well, you tell me, I guess. So when you had to perform that function, it was. So
when I was in the SLT or the regions, they changed names. We worked with the community advocates or the community groups within that area. And district-wide, but if you were in the West Ward, which I was, they had the West Ward Coalition and different places. So they were a part of the school district as well, even though they were their own organization. because it was their children or children of their constituencies, and because they wanted to do functions and they had different things that they wanted to contribute to the school. And sometimes their contributions were advocacy for things that the school district may not have been up to par on. So it could have been very rigorous, but that was what they did. They still worked on behalf of their community, and we weren't adversarial. That adversarial doesn't work. Well, it didn't work in the realm in which I was working in. There were some things we wouldn't agree on, but there's a lot of things that we would. And sometimes they wanted to raise money for a particular action that had taken place in the district or something within a building, or you just work with them. You just work with the people. It was very comforting to me because I went to school in Newark as a child, and some of the people I went to school with them.
Really?
Yeah, they were adults. So, and their children were in school. So you just couldn't act in isolation. Those were their children and their community, and things that you could do to help. They rent the building sometime for functions, and we'd come around and show our face and show our support. They'd have annual functions, like this Westward Coalition would have their annual conference. They invited us, and we would participate. And if they asked us to give a workshop or do a session, then we would do it. Just as they would come and work with us when we had to do things. Those community groups are an integral part of the community, and we need to be present with them, and they need to be present with us. And not always everything about our relationship will be rosy, but most things will be vital.
Well, it's interesting. So it's good that you can bring that here. And I guess in some respects, is it a little simpler here since we're just one district? We don't have the 5 subsets. Mm-hmm. I mean, Columbia is a pretty big school. I mean, and the district it's not really a small district. Mm-hmm. I mean, was it maybe about a quarter the size or less than a quarter the size in Newark? But still, it's probably one of the bigger ones in Essex County, I would think. But
Newark Public Schools had 37,000 children when I was there. I think we have about
7,000 or 8,000, something like that. So yeah, it's still a reasonably good size.
Yeah, it is. It is a very reasonably good size, right? In this particular position, I don't have much of an opportunity to operate with the community groups. So I think Achieve, maybe the only group that I really have operated with, Black Parents Workshop, I operate with them too. So there you go.
Yeah, well, Achieve is that's a volunteer group, I
Right.
think, and the Black Parents Workshop, I'm familiar with that too.
Right.
In fact, I think we had them on this show, but it was several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But those seem like they're that community interface. I mean, has to be a really important aspect, I would think.
Yes,
I
agree.
Of what you do. And if you've had all that experience in your previous position in Newark, I think that's a pretty good thing to be able to bring into here. We only have a couple seconds left, so this might be a good time to take a break. So we'll talk about some other things when we come back. Mm-hmm. So if you stay with us, we'll be back in about a minute, and we'll continue our conversation with Stacey Robinson, HR Director for the South Orange Maplewood School District. And we'll get into, perhaps we've gotten to a little bit of a background on what's broader here. And so maybe now we'll get into some aspect of the different functions of HR, how it may be different in a public entity like the school district than it might be in a private business. So stay with us. We'll be back in a minute.
It's an onion.
Hi, and welcome back to Education Roundtable. This is Larry Petraccaro with Stacey Robinson, the Director of HR. And we spent the first half of the show talking a little bit about Stacey, about her background, about what brought her into HR. And again, it wasn't something that, she woke up one morning and said she wanted to be in HR. She kind of evolved into it. But in some respects, I think that's a better approach, but, bringing with you all the, not so much baggage, but all the accoutrements of the other different disciplines. So let's talk a little bit about HR. Maybe we'll start with the basics. Maybe a little bit about the organization of your department, how many people are in it, and what are the basic responsibilities and duties that you and your staff have. We'll start with that.
Okay, so HR in South Orange, Maplewood is, just like with any other school district, you're responsible for recruiting staff, retaining, and then trying to keep them there. You're responsible for their benefits, medical, 504 leaves, employee assistance programming, whatever other benefits you may have. You're responsible for the administration of daily operations, keeping their personnel files, handling different situations as they may occur regarding performance, evaluation tools. It depends. Like in some districts, evaluation tools are handled, monitoring evaluations and things of that nature are handled with curriculum and instruction, and some of them is human resources. Here, we do human resources and CNI, curriculum and instruction, work together, and we monitor with the monitoring, maintenance, and execution of our evaluation tools. That is another aspect of HR, and we also, oh my God, I lost that thought.
We're talking about evaluation.
Right, no, wait. I have my little notes. Okay. The financial administration, okay. The financial administration of HR, because we're also responsible for making sure we have, finances are aligned and budgeted for software for onboarding, like Petraccaro, the recruiting agency, the absentee management system, the evaluation system, as a matter of fact, is automated, and things of that nature. We make sure that we have our budgeting for our EAP, some of our medical services. So that is also an aspect of HR.
Do you also have the administrative responsibility for the construction and so forth that goes on, or is that
no?
That's
all facilities. So let me tell you about my staff, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention them, because you cannot do that job by yourself.
I can believe it.
So I have 3 staff members in our office. With they've been there for a long time. Miss Monique Duran is the personnel coordinator, and we have 2 administrative secretaries, Miss Cassandra Bragg, and she does substitutes, and the benefits, which is big. And she's been there for about 20 years too. And then Jennifer de Los Angeles, she's been there for, I think maybe, I don't think it's been that long, maybe 7 years. And she's actually been in the district, but she's new to HR. She came along with me in 2020.
So
and they're very knowledgeable women about the processes and procedures, as well as having historical knowledge about the district, because they've been here so long. So I was very fortunate in that way to have such a staff.
You just said something that triggered something in my mind, that historical memory. Mm-hmm. How important is that?
Well, so the optimal is that the documentation within the district would speak for itself, because God forbid something could happen to any of us. So that's optimal, but absent of that, and in addition to, it is very valuable to have people who know what has happened in the past. Don't know your past, you're doomed to repeat it.
No, I asked that because I've not been in education. I've been in in engineering and manufacturing, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of surprising, or it was when I first realized it, how important that historical perspective is it can be related to the morale of the people that work there. Mm-hmm. So, when you said that, it just triggered in my mind. It's probably not the thing most of us would think was important. You know, everything is probably documented on paper, but you know, a paper is kind of black and white, cut and dry. It doesn't get you the you know, any of the emotion or you know, any of that human aspect. Let's say of what's happened in the past. I was just curious, so
Right.
I think that makes sense. You mentioned also one of your you mentioned recruitment and retention, and I know for a long time I had served on the Board of Ed maybe 20 years ago, and back then one of the concerns was how you recruit people, especially how you recruit people of color to get a more diverse staff. And and I think diversity is the kind of thing that makes you grow, you know, as a person, as an organization, as a community. So what's the recruitment process like? What's the retention process like? And if we can get through that, then I was curious about the evaluation process as well, because those all seem like really critical components of the sound education system to me.
I think that we could talk about that forever. It's a whole other show. But let's just talk about it, briefly if we can. So recruiting, of course, we have the system, the online system. Try to enable everything. We post for jobs. We put them on the system. We put them in the hallways. We still do paper posters around the district. And we also now use professional websites, for New Jersey school boards or business officials. Or we use our emails for our professional association. There's an opening in South Orange, Maplewood. Tell everybody. We use colleges. Because they're e-enabled as well. So you have things like Handshake, and you can put job postings there and then choose the colleges that you want. You can send it to a group of colleges so the students can see it on their boards. We don't really use recruiters because not unless it's really a high level position. But those are, we have partnerships with colleges like Seton Hall for here, Montclair State. We have partnership with Kane. We try to use our community partners, and God forgive me if I forgot anybody, but we use those partners in order to get staff because we take in student interns. And so that's a good way to kind of recruit. You can see and help the interns get their certification, and they see if they like you, and you see if you like them. And sometimes we get some student interns. It's not a lot, but sometimes we do. And it's also good goodwill to work with our colleges to help the students get their certifications and bring them along into the teaching profession in general. Currently, because of the diversity issue, we've been working with the Black Parents Workshop, and we're soliciting building pathways with HBCUs regionally, like Delaware State and Morgan, like regionally, because I found in other cases, another district I worked at, when you go too far out, you have to deal with kids are coming from all over the country, number one, but a lot of times not here, a very few here and maybe not many in education, and then moving these young people from wherever they live to such a different place. Even though they're adults, they're still very young people, and sometimes the family may be concerned. And living here, it has a high cost of living. Sometimes we compete against places that don't, whose cost of living isn't as high, but we try. I just think that regionally they're more like us as far as
more attuned to the environment they're going to live
and
in.
the cost of living.
Yeah.
Right. That's so we're trying to just stay a little closer and recruit students and try to find ways to assist in those things, that the socialization and housing and things like that. See, the district can't use its public funds to assist in that manner, like how some companies give you a moving stipend
Relocation
and
expenses and so forth.
We can't do that.
You can't do that because you don't have the money to do it, or it's forbidden?
It's forbidden with public funds.
Public funds, you can't do that.
Exactly.
Okay. So are some of the disciplines here in the high school or in the elementary school harder to recruit than others?
So in general, there is a real cause for concern with education majors. Some students are not going into the younger people are not going into education at the rate they have in the past. That's in general. I heard on the news this morning, I believe, that the College of New Jersey, Trenton.
What was Trenton State? Yeah.
I'm trying not to say Trenton State because you know that's always. And so they were going to get rid of their physical education program because they only had 2 students. I'm just as an example, but there are not as many as in the past that have been coming out in education. So we have to really be diligent about that in general. But specifically, special services positions are hard to find. They're plentiful and hard to find people to fill them.
What do you mean by special services?
So a special education teacher,
Special education.
learning teacher of disabilities, a BCBA, that's a behavioral consultant, occupational therapist.
Well, have you
Those are the service related.
Well, have you found that in the years you've been involved in education that we're evolving to like a more complex sort of situation where we have to have more specialties involved in the positions you mentioned?
So I don't want to make that generalization, but it may be that may be a factor. We may have more needs now than we recognized in the past.
Yeah.
That we recognized in the past. I don't want to generalize it too much, but that may be a factor. Because special education teachers all over the country are in high demand.
Yes.
Because we don't have enough of them. World language teachers also, and of course math and science. And the funny thing about math and science is that, when math and science, you are an engineer, so, the kids coming out of college, they want to make a whole lot of money, so they go to your company, they come to you because, how do I be an engineer? I got this math and science, degree. Teaching may not be the top of their list, and you're competing against that as well.
Well, when you get teachers, math teachers, science teachers, are you getting people that came out of an educational curriculum, so to speak, or are you getting students that came out of a math, or they studied math, they studied science, and suddenly decided they wanted to be teachers? Or
so for the most part, when we get them, they went to school for education with a certification in math.
Okay.
For a certification in science or a certification in STEM, something like that. There are alternate route people, such as yourself. Would you like to become a teacher? Okay, we have a program for you. So that retire and they want to do something, and they'll go alternate route to get their certification, because you definitely have the knowledge and the background. You just have to tailor it for teaching and meet the requirements of the state.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to tailor this interview because it looks like we're running out of time. So,
really,
we didn't get to. So we did get to question 2, but but anyway,
I'll come back anytime.
Thank you, Stacey, and thank you for joining us on the Education Roundtable.